right, do stay on with me, Mr. Vaz, as we move ahead. Viewers, Russian President Vladimir Putin has been briefed on U.S. proposals for a possible Ukrainian peace deal following contacts between President Trump's envoys and Moscow's. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said envoy Kirill Dmitriev reported on the Miami trip, but Russia has not yet revealed its official position. Putin stated conditions for peace include Ukraine ceding around 5,000 square kilometers of Donbas and renouncing NATO membership. Peskov declined to discuss the format of the documents or Russia's response. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Ukrainian and US delegations made progress on a 20-point plan in Miami over the weekend. However, Kyiv and Washington have not reached agreement on Donbas territorial demands or fate of the Russian-controlled Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. And I now request Mr. Vaz to join us back in the discussion here. Mr. Vaz, now it is being voiced by several stakeholders, especially from the Russian side, that it is unlikely to accept the 20-point program, especially on the question of the Donetsk region that Ukraine says it will not give up, even if it has given up on the NATO membership.
Negotiations and discussions, frankly, will continue for some time. They're not going to be concluded. There's going to be a lot of back and forth before anyone is going to come to a logical conclusion. So we should not be surprised that lists have been given, lists have been rejected, some are being accepted. These are things that will go on inevitably, especially when you're dealing with two superpowers like Russia and the United States. The only issue is, where is Ukraine in all this? As I've said previously on one of your programs, unless you have the Quad at the table, nothing's going to be sorted out. The Quad is the United States, Russia, Ukraine, and the European Union, because they have a great deal of say in what's going to happen. This is a European war, and therefore it's got to include the Europeans to try and solve it.
But talking about the question of Quad, as you mentioned it, there were initially some talks over it, and Zelensky had clearly issued a statement that any such trilateral talks, also including the European Union, would not have the effect or the effect that he intends particularly.
I think it's actually the Americans who don't want the Europeans in. Zelensky spends most of his time on a plane between European capitals. So he's very keen to have the Europeans there.
No, the Europeans he does want, but not the, he doesn't want talks with Russia on board. He says that's
he's going to have to, he's going to have to end up with, the Russians can't not be on board because they're the other protagonists. They have to be at the table. You can't just have Americans and the Europeans and the Ukrainians, because they're not at war with each other. Russia is at war with Ukraine, so Russia has got to be there. And I think even Zelensky has to appreciate one day he's going to have to sit at a table with Putin, shake his hand, and sign the document. It's got to be a document that the Ukrainian people support, and it's got to have the support of the presidents of France, Prime Minister of Italy, Prime Minister of the UK, and the Chancellor of Germany. Those are the four big powers that have to guarantee this peace in Europe. And without them and the Americans and the Russians, this is never going to be sorted out. So I'm not surprised that this latest decision has been knocked back. I would have thought that that was definitely going to happen.
Mr. Vaz, do you think that these closed-door meetings are helping at all? Is there a need for some kind of transparency that the public needs to see as to what's really happening behind the doors? Because all we know is that meetings are happening round after round after round at different places in different countries, but there's really no outcome that's visible. And everybody now seems to be frustrated after multiple talks.
Well, this is actually the way diplomacy works. As a former Foreign Office Minister, you don't conduct your negotiations in the eye of the media. I mean, the only person who does is actually Trump. But normally speaking, it has to be behind closed doors. There are records kept of everything. If you have a meeting in the Kremlin, then I'm sure it's recorded. If you have a meeting in Miami, at Mar-a-Lago. I'd be surprised if it wasn't recorded. Wherever you have a meeting these days, everything is recorded.
But would it not make sense for a press briefing, to be organized after any crucial round of talks is held?
No, because the sand changes. The sand changes after every single meeting, because after every meeting you've got. That's why you have to have all the parties in the same room or at the same hotel, probably in somewhere like Oman, which is usually the place where people meet, where you can have some really proper discussions. Turkey obviously is another broker, but by and large has got to be over there.
All right, then. Thanks very much, Mr. Vaz, for joining me in this discussion and speaking to us. And with that, viewers, we're now going to move ahead. Now, Turkey